The recording begins with the captain speaking in a restrained tone, as if every word is being dragged out of him. He admits he has no idea whether this log will ever be recovered, but if it does, it must serve as a warning. His voice carries the weight of someone who has witnessed the collapse of certainty itself. He explains that his fleet entered what they assumed was a scarcely monitored border zone belonging to a young, chaotic species that no empire took seriously. Humans, he says, were believed to be fractured, slow in their development, overly emotional, and dependent on outdated technologies. That myth died the moment they crossed the threshold of human territory. He recounts the precise moment when their sensors detected nothing at all: no patrols, no beacons, no warning platforms, just a stretch of empty space. That absence was the first sign something was wrong. A border with no defenses is never a border, it is bait. He continues, describing how the fleet maintained formation, engines steady, weapons on minimal charge. Confidence was high. The crew joked over the comms that the humans were asleep at the controls, unaware that a military armada had slipped through their lines. Then the joke stopped. The laughter cut off mid-breath as the sensor data froze, flickered, and returned with unexplainable readings. He recalls watching entire sectors of space shift on the tactical displays, as if something enormous was present yet invisible, something distorting the fabric of the readings themselves. He ordered recalibration, but every instrument insisted there was nothing around them. That was when 3 ships vanished. Not destroyed, not attacked, vanished. No shockwaves. No heat signatures. No debris fields. Their transponders simply stopped broadcasting, and scans showed the coordinates they had occupied as untouched and undisturbed. One moment they were there, the next moment the fleet was down by 3 capital vessels. Panic rippled across the officers, but the captain ordered composure, insisting it must be a malfunction. But as he admits in the recording, he already knew it wasn't a malfunction. Nothing natural or conventional could erase 3 warships without leaving a trace. He describes how the fleet began broadcasting emergency pings, attempting to contact the missing vessels. No reply. Only the open hiss of empty frequencies. When they attempted to initiate a system-wide scan, the equipment shut down entirely, overheating despite being built to withstand combat environments. The captain says this was the first time he felt something he hadn't felt since his early training years: fear. True, unfiltered fear. The kind that warns a living creature that it has entered the domain of a predator. He tried to mask it from the crew, but they sensed it in the way his commands came a second too late, in the way his eyes never left the distorted sensor screens. He goes on to explain that their database listed human vessels as crude, blocky frigates and outdated cruisers. Yet none of the signatures they encountered matched any known classification. They were tracking movements faster than anything their empire had catalogued. But the shapes that flickered briefly on long-range sensors did not follow recognizable patterns. Some appeared to split into multiple signals. Others moved without propulsion signatures. Some reversed course faster than inertia should have allowed. Every update contradicted the one before it, like the space around them refused to obey physics. The captain admits he considered ordering an immediate retreat, but by the time he attempted to pivot the fleet, deeper distortions appeared behind them. The path they had entered from no longer existed. Space itself looked wrong, as if the humans had folded the entry corridor behind them. He states plainly in the recording, "We were already trapped long before we realized it." His fleet hadn't invaded human territory. They had stepped willingly into a cage designed to close without a sound. He reveals that the humans hadn't fired a single shot at this point. They didn't need to. Their territory handled the invasion. The captain confesses that the greatest mistake his empire ever made wasn't underestimating human firepower but underestimating human paranoia. He speaks with grim certainty when he says humans don't wait for hostile intent to be proven. Entering their territory is, in their doctrine, proof enough. He ends the section with a trembling breath, saying that what happened next confirmed the truth every species had ignored: humans weren't weak. They were waiting. The fleet did not realize it was being hunted until the humans allowed them to notice. After the initial disappearances, the surrounding space seemed to calm, almost inviting. Sensor noise dropped, distortions eased, and navigation systems briefly stabilized. The captain admits this was intentional. Humans did not pursue recklessly. They guided. Every vector the fleet chose felt logical, safe, and efficient, yet each decision pushed them deeper. Engines burned steadily as confidence tried to reassert itself, but tension never left the bridge. Silence filled the comm channels, broken only by status reports that sounded increasingly hollow. Then the first counterattack came, and it did not resemble combat. A cruiser on the outer edge of formation began transmitting corrupted telemetry, its data stream fracturing into impossible values. Crew vitals spiked, then vanished. Before the captain could issue orders, the cruiser simply faded from existence, not exploding but collapsing inward, as if space itself had swallowed it. The surrounding ships detected no residual energy, no radiation spike, no trace. The humans had removed it cleanly, like erasing an error. Panic spread despite strict discipline. Officers demanded authorization to fire blindly into surrounding space. The captain refused, stating the obvious truth: they had no target. Weapons locked onto nothing, predictive algorithms failed, and automated systems reset themselves repeatedly, unable to process contradictory inputs. The humans were not hiding. They were redefining visibility. The fleet's best minds could not determine whether the enemy was near or impossibly far, because distance itself seemed meaningless. As confusion peaked, false contacts appeared across every display. Hundreds of signatures bloomed at once, mimicking human ship profiles while violating known propulsion limits. Some charged directly toward the fleet, others retreated, some circled, daring pursuit. Several captains broke formation chasing these phantoms. None returned. The captain states with bitterness that the humans never chased them. They let the fleet tear itself apart through instinct and fear. A warning finally arrived, transmitted across every frequency simultaneously. It was brief, emotionless, and translated flawlessly into their language. Turn around. You will not receive another warning. The message did not include coordinates, identifiers, or threats. It was not a negotiation. The captain hesitated, knowing retreat would expose weakened flanks, yet staying felt worse. Before he could decide, the humans acted. Space behind the fleet collapsed into a dense interference field. Navigation calculations failed instantly. Attempting retreat caused ships to drift off course, colliding or shearing against unseen forces. The humans had sealed the corridor. The fleet was no longer moving through territory, it was contained within it. Every attempt to escape merely tightened the enclosure. More ships vanished, always from the edges, always without spectacle. The humans culled methodically, never striking the command vessel, never finishing the job quickly. The captain realizes now this was deliberate. Humans were gathering data, measuring reactions, mapping responses. They observed how long it took for panic to spread, how discipline fractured, how leadership faltered under uncertainty. He describes junior officers whispering prayers to forgotten gods, hands shaking at their consoles. Training dissolved into instinct, and instinct betrayed them. No heroics emerged, no last stands worth recording. Systems failed in sequence, not by chance but design. Life support flickered on ships never directly struck. The humans were touching everything, everywhere, all at once. By the end, survival was no longer a goal. Understanding the nature of the enemy became the only remaining priority. That reality marked the moment the fleet accepted extinction without protest or resistance forever. The moment the humans revealed themselves, the illusion of survival ended. Without warning, a presence forced itself onto every sensor the fleet possessed, overwhelming systems designed to filter false data. One human vessel appeared in the center of the formation, not emerging from concealment but asserting its existence through raw dominance of signal and gravity. It was smaller than expected, angular and unadorned, carrying no visible markings. The captain admits he initially mistook it for a scout. That mistake lasted less than a second. A single pulse rippled outward from the human ship. There was no flash, no dramatic surge of energy, just a distortion that bent space as if squeezed by an invisible fist. A dreadnought 2 kilometers away imploded instantly, its reinforced hull collapsing inward before vanishing entirely. The laws governing mass, inertia, and resistance simply failed. The human vessel did not maneuver afterward. It waited, as if daring the fleet to react. They reacted poorly. Ships scattered, formations breaking as captains attempted evasive patterns drilled into them since their first days of service. The humans anticipated every move. Other vessels appeared then, not blinking into existence but phasing into perception at points where escape routes would have been. Each arrival felt intentional, like pieces placed on a board long before the game began. The humans weren't responding. They were executing. Weapons fire erupted in desperation. Plasma, rail slugs, antimatter charges tore through empty space or struck decoys that dissolved on impact. Human ships returned fire sparingly, selecting targets with unsettling restraint. When they fired, they never missed. Entire command bridges went dark without affecting surrounding compartments. Engine cores shut down while life support remained active, trapping crews in silent, drifting coffins. The captain states that humans did not aim to destroy ships immediately. They aimed to disable certainty. One cruiser attempted ramming, accelerating beyond safety limits toward a human destroyer. The human vessel did not evade. It altered gravity around itself, redirecting the cruiser's momentum sideways. The impact never occurred. The cruiser tore itself apart under its own mass, shredded by forces it could not counter. The humans watched. No retaliation followed. The lesson was enough. Boarding alarms followed shortly after. Human Marines breached a vessel using methods the captains still cannot fully describe. Hull plating parted cleanly, sliced open without explosive force. The invaders moved with terrifying precision, advancing silently through corridors filled with smoke and flickering lights. Armor absorbed direct plasma hits without slowing them. Security teams fell before firing a second shot. Humans did not shout, threaten, or taunt. They dismantled resistance as a mechanic dismantles a broken machine. Recovered internal feeds showed humans disabling command nodes first, severing coordination before neutralizing individuals. They operated as a single organism, each movement perfectly synchronized without visible communication. The captain emphasizes that this was not aggression driven by hatred. It was procedure. Intruders were processed and removed. As casualties mounted, fragments of human data leaked through compromised systems. Tactical doctrines, border protocols, automated threat classifications. One line burned into the captain's memory: any non-human military vessel entering designated human territory is considered an active threat until removed. No exceptions. No appeals. He realized then that the humans had never feared the fleet's weapons. They feared what the fleet represented. Expansion. Precedent. Future wars. By annihilating this incursion completely, humans were preventing conflicts that had not yet begun. The remaining ships attempted surrender shortly after. Power cores shut down. Weapons were vented. The humans acknowledged none of it. When they decided a threat could not leave, surrender became irrelevant. The captain ends this part of the log knowing that what followed was not vengeance, but inevitability. The captain continues his recording with a tone stripped of denial. He explains that everything they witnessed began making sense only after fragments of human internal doctrine leaked into their systems. These fragments were never meant for outsiders, but the chaos of battle forced digital breaches in every direction. The first document they decoded wasn't a battle manual or a weapon specification. It was a statement of purpose. Humanity's guiding principle for all territorial borders. It outlined a single belief: survival is not guaranteed unless actively defended. The captain says this philosophy radiated through every line, shaping everything humans built. Their borders were not simple lines drawn in space. They were layered fortresses refined by centuries of nearly losing everything. He describes the humans' historical record with this belief. They had endured catastrophes their species should never have survived. Climate shifts that rendered continents dead zones, rogue artificial intelligences that seized entire infrastructure networks, biological plagues that rewrote genomes, and celestial events capable of sterilizing planets. Each time humanity approached extinction, they responded not with collapse but acceleration. They innovated under pressure until survival became part of their identity. Where other species sought stability, humans sought dominance over instability itself. From this history, humans shaped the architecture of their territory. The captain outlines what he learned. The first layer was the sensor web, an immense grid capable of detecting microscopic anomalies across distances no other civilization managed. It identified the fleet the moment they entered, long before they realized it. The second layer was a network of automated kill zones, unmanned structures that applied force with surgical precision. These weren't designed to wage war. They were designed to remove intrusions before humans had to intervene personally. The alien fleet had been losing ships to these automated systems without understanding the mechanisms behind the losses. The third layer was the Ghost Fleet, a set of AI-controlled vessels operating on rules far more aggressive than human crews could stomach. These ships didn't hesitate, negotiate, or question. They eliminated threats using predictive models that bordered on precognition. The captain now understands why the attacks felt so impossibly precise. They were not reacting. They were executing mathematical certainties. Humans themselves only arrived when it was clear that the fleet represented a deeper strategic issue. The fourth layer, the one that sealed their fate, consisted of human strike groups. The captain's voice tightens when describing their arrival. These units were not dispatched casually. Their presence meant the fleet had crossed a threshold. It wasn't just an incursion, it was a risk to long-term stability. Humans deployed living soldiers only when automated systems identified a threat with potential future consequences. And in the Empire's case, the potential was enormous. They were expansionist, resource-driven, and increasingly militarized. If this fleet had returned home with data on human defenses, the next conflict would have been catastrophic. What chills the captain most is the discovery that humans had already cataloged every ship in their fleet, including design flaws, probable response patterns, reactionary tendencies, and leadership structures. The humans had mapped each vessel's optimal kill path before the fleet even crossed the border. They had prepared contingency plans for scenarios the aliens themselves had never considered. By the time the fleet noticed anything was wrong, their fate had been mathematically sealed. He explains that humans were not acting out of territorial pride or xenophobia. They were protecting others. Beyond human borders existed dozens of smaller civilizations incapable of defending themselves from empires like his. If the fleet learned too much, future expansion would inevitably push through these weaker systems on the path back toward human space. Humans refused to allow their existence to enable predation elsewhere. If destroying the entire fleet prevented that chain of events, then to them, the decision was already justified. The captain speaks with grim clarity. Humans were not the monsters his people imagined. They were the result of surviving every monster they had ever faced. And now, their empire was the newest threat placed on that list. The captain resumes his final log with a subdued steadiness, as if the outcome no longer frightens him. He explains that only 2 ships remain now, his own and a damaged escort barely holding structural integrity. Human vessels have surrounded them at distances so precise they seem mathematically chosen. No weapons are aimed, no ultimatums issued. The humans simply wait. That quiet stare-down feels more suffocating than any barrage. He admits that throughout the battle he searched for patterns of cruelty, arrogance, or conquest-driven hunger. Instead, he found only efficiency and absolute certainty. Humans did not taunt or broadcast messages of dominance. They offered a single warning before acting, and once the fleet ignored it, their response became irreversible. Every step the humans took afterward followed a doctrine shaped not by violence for its own sake, but by the cold calculus of long-term security. They could not allow the fleet to retreat, because knowledge carried home would spark wars larger than this one. He recounts the escort captain pleading for permission to broadcast surrender codes again, hoping humans might recognize their intent. The codes were transmitted with every formality their empire required: stress signals, disarmament notices, offers of compliance. The humans acknowledged none of them. Their ships held position silently, their containment net tightening at a pace barely noticeable but undeniably deliberate. Humans didn't need to respond verbally. The formation itself communicated the truth. Departure was not an option. The captain explains that he finally attempted to send a personal message, stripped of rank, stripped of any political meaning, requesting only safe passage for his crew. The humans did not return a reply to that either. Instead, they disabled the escort's engines in an instant, shutting it down without destroying it. This action made their stance unmistakable. They would not kill unnecessarily, but they would permit no escape. The escort now drifts without propulsion, hydraulics slowly failing, life support flickering as the hull shudders under internal strain. He reflects on how his species interpreted human caution as weakness. They had mistaken restraint for fear. Yet, standing in the shadow of the human formation, he sees that restraint was something else entirely. It was confidence. Humans did not need to rush destruction or overwhelm opponents with theatrical brutality. They fought like a people accustomed to surviving catastrophes so severe that nothing external could rattle them. Their discipline was born from trauma, refined through centuries of forced adaptation. When they judged something a threat, they acted with an unwavering hand. The captain's tone softens further as he contemplates his own role. He realizes that none of the humans' actions stemmed from personal malice toward him or his kind. They were eliminating a future that his empire did not yet realize it was preparing for. He admits that if his fleet returned home, strategists would dissect every frame of recorded data, identify weaknesses in human defenses, and begin planning their next move. The conflict would not die here. It would merely begin. The humans understood that long before the Empire did. He gives one last warning for anyone who might hear his recording. Entering human territory is not a provocation they answer, it is a decision they finalize. Once inside, every intruder is treated as an inevitable threat, not because humans desire dominance, but because they refuse to gamble with survival again. They learned the cost of hesitation too many times in their own history. They will never pay that price again. The structural supports of his vessel tremble, and he acknowledges without panic that the humans are preparing to board. He accepts that they will not harm his crew unless resistance forces their hand. They will remove every possibility of intelligence leaving this region. That is simply how they ensure peace. He ends with a confession. He does not resent them. He respects them. He envies the unity carved into their identity. His last words are directed at his empire. Stay away from human borders. Do not test their resolve. Once you cross into their domain, you do not return, not because they hate you, but because they cannot afford to let you go.